make a misstep here, because I think the favorability of the job the Democrats are doing is 28%. It's the lowest it's ever been since Quinnipiac poll started in 2009. And their favorabilities is like 41%. And Republicans have a 52 or 58% favorability right now. And their disapproval is, what the remainder of that. So this is something that's good. It's going to go through. It is the big, beautiful bill that Trump wanted. And it's where we go from here. The sooner they get this done, the faster they can work on these other things. And we can talk more about that.
Well, you know what? One of the things the Democrats might ought to consider doing is to curse a little bit more, Ted. They're just not cursing enough. I thought about pulling up a video where it shows all the way they're reacting to all of this stuff, but I just didn't want to play it for our audience. I mean, it's just insane. But I would encourage people to go like on YouTube. By the way, they can see our show on the Ward Scott Files YouTube channel now, live every Monday and Friday. But yeah, they just curse up a storm. It's like this Crockett lady, I mean, she's an attorney, so you assume she's pretty well educated, but she's throwing the F-bomb around like it's not. I think it's an act, actually. I don't think she actually normally talks that way, but I even saw one video, Ted, where one of the congresswomen was saying, I don't normally use the F-bomb, but F Donald Trump, you know what I mean? It's just crazy what they're doing. I don't see how they think it's going to work.
The level of the caliber of people that are coming in there is deteriorating. And, I see it on both sides, but more on the Democratic side. They're angry. They come in angry. They come in thinking they can, make their video presence or their Facebook page, a mainstream influencer. And all they're doing is disrupting the country. These people need to get out of Congress. I had my moments. I ran on term limits. I honored that. Pass the baton off, and these people are up there, and they're not really trying to solve problems. It's all about them. And
it's all about grandstanding and getting
right.
Like I think Chairman Comer said in one of his committee meetings, it's all about getting a snippet on MSNBC or something. It seems that way.
It is. Why you would want to go on MSNBC? I don't know, because I don't know anybody that's left on that.
It's getting crazier by that. I don't know. Side note: Lawrence O'Donnell actually said that he's going to have to take a week off because it's only 52. I think it's yesterday, 52 days in President Trump's term, and he said it feels like 90, and I just need some time off. They need to take the whole thing off. But let's talk a little bit more in depth about this big, beautiful bill and what needs to happen for it to pass. I want to read a little bit from a Breitbart article.
Sure.
In the Senate, although Republicans hold a majority with 53 seats, Majority Leader John Thune from Republican, it said it needs 60 votes to advance the legislation, what they call cloture, which means end the discussion and go to a vote.
Correct.
And right now they don't have that, although Schumer came out early yesterday evening, and said that he would vote for it and get 7 Democrats to vote for cloture. Now, make no mistake, and you can explain this probably better than me, that doesn't mean they're going to vote for actually the funding bill. It just means they're going to allow the Republicans to carry the day, if that. But can you explain the cloture and all that to us, Ted?
Well, the cloture, you bring that up and it stops any more discussion on the bill, as you aptly said. And so the bill needs to be voted on. It's supposed to be voted on. And if they carry it through and it passes, then you move on to the next step. Schumer, you're going to see him play all kinds of political games. And I guess rightly so from a party dynamics, but it's not good for the country. Let's move on. Let's get this bill passed. Let's move on so we can start working on these things. The immigration issue, what DOGE is doing, and the revamping of a lot of these programs. If we get bogged down on stuff like this, those other things get put on the burner and they really don't get addressed. And then you know what? You've got the midterms. When you get a new presidency and a new Congress, you've got about not even 18 months to really do some significant changes, because at that point, everything focuses on the next election. And it's a terrible thing, the way that system is set up and the mindset up there. If they would just focus on their work and not the Crockett's and the other people using the F-bombs and doing the theatrics up there, they would get a lot more done.
Absolutely. Well, Schumer is basically trying to negotiate a deal to save face, to make it so they don't want to shut it down. Now, secretly, I think that they would like to shut the government down, the Democrats, only because they think that might be the only way to stop the whole Doge process, that they could stop that. But they normally are not for government shutdown because they're for more government, not less government. And I think the thing that the Democrats have feared in the past about shutting the government down is we might realize how little government we actually need.
You know what? That is 100% true. And, you're talking about the Doge thing. That needs to go on. Our government needs to be revamped. These programs all across the board need to be revamped and reimagined. And you can do it proactively, which is what Trump is doing. It may be ugly, it may be messy, but if we don't do that, all you have to do is look at history. Look at Greece, look at France, look at where they have had in the past 10 years where they've had austerity measures, where the government's out of money. They cut the programs, the money, currency of that nation gets devalued. There's riots in the street, and there's a lot of mayhem. And I'm just thankful they've got the backbone to go ahead and do this. It's ugly, but what you're going to see, and Trump has even admitted this, it's time to take the hatchet away and start using the scalpel on these programs. And I think you're going to see really good reforms come out of this.
One thing we know for sure, you mentioned like Greece and Italy and some of the other countries that had some financial issues. We got to ride our own ship because no one's coming to rescue us.
Trust me. I mean,
they don't do that.
You got people out there applauding what's going on in America and hope we continue to flounder and go away. But, the world needs America. We will do fine. We will come out of this. I have faith in the system. And maybe not a lot of people in the system, but our system that was designed with the Constitution and the founding fathers is still the best on the planet.
I 100%. So Schumer said this on the House floor on the Senate floor a couple of days. Said funding the government should be a bipartisan effort, but Republicans choose a partisan path, drafting their continuing resolution without any input from congressional Democrats. Well, that's all they're doing is cursing. He went on to say, because of that, Republicans do not have the votes in the Senate to invoke cloture on the House CR. But he also, right after he said this, he put forward a 30-day CR that basically, that they crafted without bipartisan support and said, if you'll bring this up for a vote, then we'll vote for cloture. Now, I think it's all smoke and mirrors that what's going to happen is they're going to come up with 7, and probably including Schumer himself, that vote for cloture. Yeah. And then they'll probably dismiss this amended bill, and then the Democrats will likely vote pretty much in locks. I mean, not the Democrats, the Republicans, with probably the exception maybe of Rand Paul, and will vote for it, and it will ultimately pass. But that's kind of what my prediction is, Ted. What do you think?
No, I think you're right. And it's funny how Schumer talks about it's not even bipartisan. Oh, you mean like Obamacare wasn't bipartisan? They did that in the hours in the middle of the night, 20-some hundred pages. And now he wants everything to be bipartisan. It's the pot calling the kettle black. These guys are so disingenuous and two-faced. And, you're going to hear the same argument. These are the same arguments, John. When I went into Congress in 2013, I voted not to raise the debt ceiling. I voted for the government shutdown. I got called crazy. And they said, well, if you shut the government down or don't raise the debt ceiling, we're going to default. It was a false narrative. You default when you do not pay your bills. We're going to pay our bills. It's just we're going to stop the nonsense. And keep in mind, at that time, we were $13.5 trillion in debt. And I wanted to bring attention to this and say, hey, listen, we realize we have a spending problem and we need to deal with it now. And it would be good for the markets long term, because the rest of the world say, you know what? America realizes they've got a spending problem and they're getting this under control. And it's kind of like what Doge is doing right now. It's ugly, but it's going to be better afterwards.
Yeah, well, the whole thing about default, I remember those what you were talking about when you were there and all the discussions. And please correct me if I'm wrong on this, Ted, because you have more hands-on experience. But really, defaulting is not really possible. I mean, in the way they describe this, not like if they don't vote for the continuing resolution that we default on our debt, because there are mechanisms where we have to pay certain things no matter what. And there's money to do that. And I don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that government shutdown ultimately wouldn't be a bad thing, but the idea that if they don't pass these debt ceilings and continuing resolutions, that we're just automatically the next day going to default on our debt is simply not true, is it?
You're absolutely right. And that's the narrative. It gets out there in the press, and you get the Presley's, Ayanna Presley, and all these other people out there. Oh, the Republicans shut the government down. We're going to default. It's never happened. It's going to ruin our credit limit, our credit rating. What's ruining our credit rating as the United States of America is the amount of debt, the amount of interest that we're paying. We're paying, you guys know, you've heard this many a time, we're paying more on our interest than we do on our military. That is unsustainable. And so addressing the problem, recognizing you do have a problem, number one, and then addressing that, I can't think of a better thing to do to increase the credibility of a country. And like you said, default is when you do not pay your bills. The United States has always paid your bill. Raising the debt ceiling, not raising the debt ceiling, is not a default. And that's the thing they attacked me at, said I was crazy, didn't know anything about economy. But, we're at $36 trillion. So who really was the crazy one? The guy that tried to fix it back in 2013 and 14, or the people that have let it go on?
Well, you mentioned not paying your bills and how you were crazy about that. But I know, Ted, that you just celebrated an anniversary not too long
ago. We sure did. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and basically your wife is your high school sweetheart, right?
Well, we met in the 4th grade.
Well, there you go, elementary school sweetheart.
Couldn't date.
So,
I couldn't date that.
I don't want to give you too much credit because she probably deserves a good chunk of it. But somehow you've managed to pay your bills all these many years and raise a family and everything else. So that's probably more experience to run and do the deficit in Congress than anything most of these yahoos have.
Well, it's funny. I'm sure you've been through the same thing. I've been better off and I've been worse off in life as far monetarily. And I came to this conclusion early. It's better to have a little bit more than a little bit less, a little bit sooner than a little bit later. And I've had credit problems where I was borrowing on my credit card to pay bills. And that's not sustainable. That's not a good thing. And then I use credit to grow my business. That's a good thing because you got increased revenues and everything gets better. And that's what our government is doing. They're not borrowing money to improve anything. They're borrowing money to pay past bills. And that's terrible. And I remember John Boehner says, I don't want to hear any of you freshmen talk about you're not going to raise the debt ceiling. And I says, sir, I can't. I raised my hand. I said, sir, I can't vote to raise the debt ceiling. He was mad at me. And he goes, if we don't raise our debt ceiling, we're going to default. I says, no, sir. Default is when you don't pay a bill. I said, tell me a bill what won't be paid. Is it Medicare? Is it Social Security? Is it the VA? Give me the bill and tell me the amount that won't be paid. And I says, we can borrow money like we do in business and do a bridge loan. If I need $1 million, and I'm short, but I know the money's coming in, let's borrow and pay the bill. Oh, he was mad at me.
I hear you. So this whole thing is just showed. I'm going to play a video here in just a second. Good. And I'm going to let people kind of guess while we're playing it when this was. This is Chuck Schumer talking about the potential of shutting the government down and not voting for the CR. Let's play this Chuck Schumer about not shutting down the government, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Check it out.
To cooperate and approve the government funding legislation without delay. If Republicans choose obstruction, there will be a shutdown entirely because of their own dysfunction. We cannot afford to go down that road. As winter begins, The last thing Americans need right now is an avoidable, Republican-manufactured shutdown that will potentially harm millions of federal workers, harm their families, and harm local communities that rely on an open and functioning federal government. Democrats are going to work all week to make sure no...
Well, there you go. There you have Chuck Schumer talking about the need not to shut down the government. Now, I know you already know this, Ted, but can people out there guess when this was? Was this like last Tuesday or whatever? This was 3 years ago. This is Chuck Schumer talking about not shutting down the government 3 years ago. And you can go back even further when they talk about this. So they're so disingenuous, Ted, and both sides are guilty a little bit about that. We'll talk. Yeah, put their finger to the wind, whichever which way it goes. But there's Chuck Schumer 3 years ago talking about not shutting the government down, and now he's threatening to shut the government down. But it's not. It's only to stop Elon Musk and President Trump. That's the only reason.
It is. I mean, they're trying to. Their whole narrative is, how can we make the other team look really, really bad? And if we do that, we're going to get back in power, and it's about power and control.
Yeah. Well, here's something I wanted to talk about on this, Ted, and you may, or we hadn't really discussed this prior to the show, but you may or may not agree with me on this. But I'm, Congressman Massey from Kentucky, I believe, was the only Republican that voted against this CR. They had one gentleman from Maine vote for it from the Democratic Party. So in a way, it was bipartisan in at the simplest thing. But I kind of agree with Congressman Massey with the caveat. I'm totally opposed in general to these CRs. We need to get back to what they call regular order, and you can explain to us what that is in a minute. But the only one in Washington, and I'm painting with a big broad brush because you're not there currently, Ted, that I really trust is Donald J. Trump. And even President Trump, when he was 45 and not 47, the biggest disappointment I had in Donald Trump's first term in office was that we did not get back to regular order, that we didn't get back to the regular budget process, which he somewhat promised to do. So I'm willing to give him one more shot to get this right so that they can do what Speaker Johnson said, that they can now work on, if this passes, they can work on regular order for the next fiscal year. But, I only trust Donald Trump, but we got to hold these people accountable, including Republicans.
I agree. And this is where the voters, educating the voters and letting them know these processes. If your representative doesn't work to get back to the regular order you brought up, and I'll explain that, and they're just playing these games, and you see them on the news and doing all these videos raising funds, throw them out of there. They're not doing the business of the nation. This is not about the now. This is about the prosperity of this country, 15, 20 generations to come. And I heard Trump say something the other day, and I really applauded it. The Chinese have the 100-year marathon. They're looking 100 years down the road. And Trump acknowledged this. He goes, our problem is we don't look long-term. We need to look 100 years down the road. And it was like, thank God somebody's finally listening. Regular order. And this is something they talk about in Congress, but it doesn't happen. I think the last time it really happened of significance was under Clinton and Newt Gingrich. It's where you pass all your appropriation bills. There's 12 appropriation bills. You get them passed, you get them through, everybody agrees on it, and that's your spending for the year. All right. And so you don't have CRs. CRs are a waste of time. Everything has to start all over. You start through the negotiations, and you stay in these political fights instead of really working to make Social Security solvent or Medicare solvent, fix the VA, make better services to our veterans. But you can't do that if you're in all these silly committee hearings or you're going back and forth on the budget. You saw the oversight with Jamie Comer, who I saw when I was up in D.C. Tuesday. Told him, keep up the good fight. But by doing the regular budgeting and you get that out of the way, you can move on with other things. And the other problem is they are on a 1-year appropriations. So they'll appropriate it, and then they have to have the fight again to come the next January. They have to refund the government in that September. If they went to a 2-year budgeting, say right now, if they get all their bills through the committees, the Department of Defense, Department of Education, all these USDA, if they get that done now and they fund it for 2 years, John, think of what they could do if they had that done by, say, June, the first 6 months. Now you've got 18 months you can really focus on reforming these programs. But you get into politics because the appropriators say, well, that's our job. We're to spend the money. And we don't want to go to a 2 year because then we're kind of insignificant. So,
well, Ted, and you may or may not agree with me on this, but this is something I've been telling people, and this includes President Trump. It's really not up to the president to do this. It's not up to the Senate to get this done. It's not up to the House to get this done. It's up to you and me, the American people. We have to hold these people accountable. And if we're not going to do that, then don't expect it to really get done. The best we can hope for, if we don't get active and motivated, educated, motivated, and activated, as I like to say, as citizenry, then we're just going to slow the decline process. That's the best we can hope for. But it's up to us to hold them accountable. I really believe
our founders were so smart about that. You had to have a well-educated, moral electorate. And you have to have a responsible citizen body citizenry in order to have a constitutional republic that gives us the liberties and freedoms we have. And if you don't have that, all that tied together, you get that slow decay. And then, that's what we're going through. And that's the thing that really hurts me, because this country is so great with the values, the things it's done around the world. It's the model people follow around the world. You've heard me talk about Ho Chi Minh read our Declaration of Independence back in I think it was the 20s or 40s in Vietnam, because it was so important of a document, and it's referred to. And these people that are in government are there, a lot of them, not all of them. There are some good people, but they're self-serving themselves. They're looking at their next position that they can run to, and so they get the news flashes and all that. And it's time to move on from these type of people. Those are politicians, not statesmen.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We hope you will keep retune into the show. Support our sponsors, because without them and your support, we can't do this show. We can't educate, motivate, and activate people, which I think is part of our mission here. So we'll take this commercial break and we'll be right back.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Ward, that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle
handle the truth.
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. I wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
Like the president says, we're back, baby. We're back. And appreciate everybody tuning in and looking at our commercials there, our sponsors. Please support them. If you'd like to be a sponsor, you can see the tagline about contacting Freddie during the show and make that happen. But I wanted to talk a little bit, Ted, the topic, I call it to deport or not to deport. That is the question. And I don't know if you saw this that happened at Trump Towers in New York yesterday. But we're going to play a very short video that shows a demonstration that happened at Trump Towers. Can we play that?
Ari, who are they all? And if the world is watching our nation right now and they know us as you know, a bastion of free speech, so on and so forth, when you hate, when people feel under threat because of what you're saying, that's actually not protected speech.
That's right.
And look at some of the signage in here. I mean, they hate Israel. They hate Jewish Americans. They are anti-American.
I'll make 2 big points here. One, I'm going to start with the speech facade, the myth that this is about speech. What happened to Mahmoud Khalil had nothing to do with speech. It has everything to do with creating an encampment that is where Zionists are prohibited, where Jewish students are not allowed to walk on their own campus. These are crimes. These are deportable.
Yeah, that happened yesterday at Trump Tower in New York, where they were bum rushed basically by, they want to call it pro-Palestinian, but let's just call it like it is, like we can do on this show, Ted. It's pro-Hamas. That's what this is all about. And this is all about a guy named Mohammed Khalil, I hope I'm saying that right, who was arrested by federal agents because he's been leading these demonstrations primarily at Columbia, but several other universities. And they're looking to deport this guy. He's not an American citizen. He's here essentially on a student visa. And he's leading these riots. And they've been attacking police officers. And they went to Trump Tower. Any thoughts on this, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the people in this video, I think it's interesting. You know, those aren't protesters. Those are people that are paid to be there. I mean, they're having a fun time. You know, just look at the people in the crowd. People that are passionate about protesting, they have a different look on them. These people, I don't know who's paying them. I mean, it always seems to go back to Soros and that type of people, but it's reminiscent of Antifa, Black Lives Matter, that whole crowd that America's tired of. They're disruptive and they're protesting something that's not a winning argument in this country. And I think, I'm not sure if it was Ari Fleshman that was one of the commentators.
It was.
And he said the Justice Department ought to treat these people exactly how they treated the January 6th people. And that's a pretty strong statement coming from Ari Fleshman. You know, why is it any different than what they did at the Capitol? I know the Capitol was the nation's center for government, but this is just as disruptive, and I think it's time they crack down on these fake protests like this. Going back to Mahmoud Khalil, he should be deported. He's here as a guest. It's a green card. It's not citizenship, and it's not permanent. If you screw up, it gets taken away. It's a privilege to be in this country. And the thing they forget is if you're going to be in this country and you want to be a citizen, you need to assimilate into the values of this country. And if not, go home, go away, go over to Ireland with Rosie O'Donnell.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned about the January 6th, and I hear some Democrats using that argument, you know, that they weren't treated the same. And yeah, they have not been treated the same, because the January 6th people, love it, hate it, whatever your side is, if you choose a side, they were arrested, they were sentenced, and many of them spent significant time behind bars, and then they were pardoned. So the people at these that they're talking about have not been treated like the January 6 people at all. You know, they haven't been arrested. They haven't been sentenced. They haven't served any time. And of course, they haven't been pardoned. They want to get to the pardon part before the actual sentencing part. So to me, there's really no comparison between how they were treated, but that's what they keep saying.
We might have to go back to Biden's executive orders to see if he did preemptive pardons for all these type of people, you know, like he did for Hunter and the Biden.
Could be. Well, you talked about, you know, that they don't have a right to be here. I want to play a snippet of a longer video, but this is Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who, by the way, has a big deal going this weekend. He's going to be participating in the G7 in Canada, I believe it is, this weekend. It's got a big speech, and we'll cover that on Monday, I suppose. But this is Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking specifically about this Mohammed Khalil case. Let's check it out.
United States as a visitor, which is what a visa is, which is how this individual entered this country on a visitor's visa. Okay, you are here as a visitor. We can deny you that visa. We can deny you that if you tell us when you apply, hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities. I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it. And if you end up having a green card, not citizenship, but a green card as a result of that visa while you're here in those activities, we're going to kick you out. It's as simple as that. This is not about free speech. This is about people.
I mean, who could say it better than Secretary Rubio? I mean, he put it right out there succinctly on the line, Ted.
It was a real matter of fact, and I don't see any controversy in that. It's play by the rules, play by this nation's rules. There's other ways if you want to protest it somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I have an idea for all these protesters, including Mohammed Khalil. And I'd be willing to start a GoFundMe page for this and make the first $100 donation. I'll give them an all-expense paid trip back to Gaza. They can go back to all these protesters that are talking, you know, all these transgenders, all this crazy stuff that they're protesting and everything. Can you imagine if they actually had to go back to Gaza or Syria, where this Mohammed Khalil has lived in the past? I mean, it's just crazy that they think that they're talking for an organization that would put them to death. And what do you think about that, Ted? Let's send them all back to Gaza.
Well, I think you throw in that bunch to Talib Rashid from Michigan. You know, way she was leading those protests in the Cannon office building, you know, right after the attacks happened in Israel. And she's fomenting hatred, hate speech. She's doing the same thing. And she should have been censored like Al Green was, but they didn't do that because it was, you know, for whatever reason, but she should have been censored. She was using government property to cause dissent and protest and violence.
Well, we're going to we got about roughly about 10 minutes left in the show. And so I want to, we're going to end the show with some good news, bad news here in a minute. But before we get into that, Ted, I know you, I'd call it Ted's Corner, so to speak here, that you have a few topics you'd like to discuss, kind of a hodgepodge of stuff. Starting with the Trump-Putin-Ukraine deal and all that, they had some big news, maybe not so big news. It's really a fluid situation, but update us on what's happening with Ukraine, the war, the Russian-Ukrainian war.
Yeah, I want everybody to keep it in context. Go back to when the Zelensky-Trump meeting happened in the White House and how Trump says, you know what, the deal's off, we're cutting aid, we're cutting intelligence. Look at what Putin did in that short period of time. He advanced, pushed the Ukrainians back, And it's crazy how he gets his soldiers to do it. They were crawling through old gas tunnels with a lot of methane in it so they could flank the Ukrainians. In that process, they lost several soldiers from methane poisoning. All right, so Trump acted back a couple weeks ago. It showed a weakened hand, I think, and gave Putin room to move forward. And now Putin says, well, you've come to an agreement, but at the agreement it was Rubio, Ukrainians, and Saudi Arabia with no Russians. And now they're presenting this package to Putin, and he goes, well, we're going to have to think about it. And what he's doing is he's biding time, and he's moving forward. I think this is a misstep, and I think you're going to see Putin drag this out as long as he can and shell. And I think there's going to have to be a pivot by the White House and really crack down on this. And I had a bunch of things that I sent to you that didn't go through the email, but it was talking about Trump saying, well, we hopefully want Putin to do the right thing. Putin has never done the right thing from what we think is right. He's going to do what's right for Putin to reclaim the fatherland or the motherland of the Soviet Empire.
Yeah, no doubt. And a matter of fact, there's a meeting happening today that is a bit scary when you think about it, that you've got I think they're meeting in China. You got representatives of Russia, obviously China, and Iran are having some kind of trilateral meeting in China today, literally as we speak. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. But that's a real scary thought, that those three countries could join together in some form or fashion.
It really is. I mean, any kind of cooperation between those three are going to be anti-American, 100%. And they're gearing up for their next move. It's, they're moving the dominoes around on the board, or the chess pieces around, to make their next move. And I'm sure there'll be a representative of North Korea there. I still don't understand the benefit of North Korea helping Russia, other than to gain military experience for their fighters. We're in some scary times here.
Well, we talked a little bit about this on our last show, Ted, but, if you just look at the surface of it, you might think, oh, well, that, these are communists and that type of thing, and that they have a natural unity. But the reality is they don't. Russia and China have combated each other on that border for centuries, really. And they're natural adversaries, actually, not natural, alliance. And then when you throw Iran in, they're obviously just being used because China has an issue with Muslims. I mean, they mistreat Muslims in China. And Russia, the whole Chechenian war and everything was basically a Muslim war. So you got three countries that really only have one common thread, and that is they want to disrupt the United States of America.
They have the hatred.
That's the only real cohesion they have.
It really is. That's not a strong foundation to stand on. They want to weaken America, hopefully bring it to its knees, and then China will just sit back and pick up the pieces. Putin, he's smart enough to know. He's been in the KGB long enough. He knows what Russia or China's end play is, and it's going to be interesting to see how they play this out. I just hope we stay and grow in strength and become more unified as a nation. There is the world disruption, as you're seeing going around. I was reading about economies, and they're saying probably the best thing is Germany for their economy is starting up their war machine and military manufacturing. Now, what good is military equipment? You just can't keep producing. It's got to be used. So where's it going to be used? And is that going to foment World War III or a larger conflict in that Ukrainian theater? In the meantime, the Middle East is going on, and at some point, China will move on Taiwan, and that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, but people have been talking about Donald Trump with this thing going back to Zelensky in the Oval Office, and talking about how he's weakening the alliance, the European alliance, and everything. But if you look at what people are really saying, the ones that matter. Yesterday, I believe it was, in the Oval Office, the president hosted the head of NATO yesterday, and he was nothing but praise for Donald Trump. And they had a good meeting, and essentially the guy said that Donald Trump has made NATO stronger. So the reality is not what you're hearing in the press.
No, we talked about that on a hearing of Foreign Affairs. The Democrats and a lot of Republicans were bashing Trump for weakening the NATO alliance. And I said, no. I says, if you look back before Trump came in, this is how much those countries were in arrears. This is where their funding was for NATO. Now you look like a year and a half, 2 years into the Trump administration, they had like 36 or $39 billion, which was like 2 or 3 times what they had before. The Trump effect got people to the table. It made them pay. And he's great at doing that. But
absolutely.
On the Russia with Zelensky, with dealing with Putin, that's a different story. And time will tell how that plays out. I just hope he is very astute at what he is doing. That is Trump, and that he calls Putin to the table. And with this buildup of the European forces, that's really got to get Putin thinking like, maybe I've hit the beehive too many times, and they're getting ready to sting me.
Well, what Donald Trump is doing, what he did in his first term, and now he's really expanding upon it with the Doge and with NATO and all that. Donald Trump is shining a light and exposing the rot that was there. He's basically showed that the European alliance was weakening and going down, and he just put a light on it and said, look, guys, we're not going to go down with you, so either you shape up or we're shipping out. He's actually exposed what's happening there. Really?
He's shining light on there, and they say light's the best disinfectant. That is something that he'll be remembered as somebody that really brought NATO back to do what they're supposed to do with the agreement that we've had since World War II. And it'll make the world a safer place. It's ugly anytime you go through these things. Any of that change, it's getting through that change. And that brings us back to Doge. If they get through this and they make these reforms, and I go up to DC and I came back, and what they did with USAID, it needed to be done. How they did it is chaos, because they've got programs they stopped and they started back. They're trying to get money out, but there's nobody there because they fired them all. It got stopped again. The money's coming back. And so it shows so much just where we don't know what we're doing. It's a lot of chaos. And so it hurts our credibility around the world as leaders that people want to align with. And the faster we get through that, the better it'll be for this nation. And I truly believe they're going to get through it. And if you notice, the Department of Education, they were going to axe that. But now they're going through there. They're saying we're going to close these offices here. They've started to lay off, I think it was over 1,400 people, giving them buyout options. And so it's more of a measured reform of that. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that. The faster they do that, the better it'll be for the country.
Absolutely. And you mentioned earlier in the show about the protests or so-called protests, who's paying for it. We're finding out through Doge that, in fact, we're paying for it in many.
You know what? That's true. That's true. I was on a call with the Council of Foreign Relations yesterday on foreign assistance, and I'm not a fan of the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. They're all about one world government and things like that. And they were bashing what Trump was doing. I says, there were some terrible programs that were driving people that were allies and friends away from us. So those programs that we're paying for are hurting America. And so they need to go away, and they never need to come back. And so I was kind of, I wanted to be in the lion's den there to see what their sentiment was.
Run towards the fire, right? Well, we pretty much out of time, but I want to end the show on a good news, bad news note. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but it is kind of a tragedy in some ways. But then again, it's a hoorah moment for Donald Trump. Let's play this video about a young lady who is making a trip to Ireland. Can we play that?
I miss my friends. I miss many things about life there at home, and I'm trying to find a home here in this beautiful country. And when, it is safe for all citizens to have equal rights there in America, that's when we will consider coming back. It's been heartbreaking to see what's happening politically, and hard for me personally as well.
Well, I don't know if it's good news, bad news, depends on how you look at it, I suppose. But Rosie O'Donnell, and I'll give her credit. Let me give her credit, Ted. At least she had the guts to do what she said she was going to do when all these other stars and stuff say, oh, we're leaving if Trump wins, and they're still here. I wish they'd go with Rosie, but thoughts on Miss O'Donnell while we close out the show?
No, I think you're right. I mean, she ought to be applauded for doing what she said she was going to do, and I'll help her back.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I value her as a commentator. She was one of those ones just full of hatred, just so much hatred, and dividing people. So good luck to her, good riddance to her. I feel bad that her adopted daughter has got to go to another country and not enjoy the blessings of America, because her mother is of a different political mindset. So good luck to her and to her daughter.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ted, good luck to you. And have a great weekend, my friend.
Wonder if we're going to have to send subsidies to Ireland to keep her or anything.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but it's just coincidental that the Prime Minister of Ireland was at the White House a couple of days ago, right after this came out, and Trump asked him, do you know you just picked up Rosie O'Donnell? He said, I don't even know who that is, basically. So, Donald Trump, we're exporting our starlets to, if you want to call her that, to Ireland. So we may owe them, we may have to take a tariff off of Ireland for them taking her.
Right.
So,
well, maybe you have fair weather over the weekend and tight lines on your poles.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. You can watch our show live Monday and Friday, 9:00 on the Ward Scott Files podcast Facebook channel. You can also see it live on the YouTube channel and anywhere you watch your favorite podcast. If you have suggestions for the show, comments, please send them in and we'll answer them in as timely a